Velkommen og god dag alle sammen. This is the very start of the series where I will be looking at Havamal, and that's how you say it. Stop saying Havamal, okay? Stop saying Havamal. I say Havamal usually because I'm Norwegian, that's how we say it there. Or if you really want to say it right in Old Norse, you can say Hávamál, okay? But stop calling it Havamal, okay? You're sounding like an idiot. So I will read every stanza of this poem and give a summary and explanation. And when applicable, I will give you a couple little bonus notes about the history of the pre-Christian Scandinavians, because there are some things that many people forget. And understanding these things will give you a better understanding of the meaning behind some of these stanzas in Havamal that are a bit more confusing. So I'll make a few stanzas per video most of the time because a lot of them go very well together. And some stanzas I can actually make a full-on long video about the just one. Also, since this is an intro video, I'll say one thing that's maybe a bit unpopular and that maybe some of you are not going to like. A lot of these stanzas have to do with ethics and suggestions about how to live, and that's great. This is a book of ethics that we have, and the Vikings were very ethical people. We didn't need a book to tell us thou shalt not kill or tell us about all the deadly sins not to do. We already knew how to do this. So these ethics in Havamal, it's just some little bonus ways to live a healthier and happier and more successful life. Just keep in mind that Havamal was written probably by one or a few old men and poets, and it does not necessarily reflect the views or actions of the pre-Christian Scandinavians in general. In fact, when reading Havamal, many of the stanzas, you kind of get the feeling that the person who wrote Havamal was kind of a grumpy, old, pompous, condescending, egotistical old man. Not all of the stanzas. 90% of Havamal is just great advice that we can all agree with. Anyone with a logical brain can agree with. But probably 10% of them is kind of something that a grumpy old arrogant man would say, and we'll go over these in the videos. But I mean, just the words of the title Havamal translated means words of the High One. It's supposed to be Odin. Odin did not write this, just like Jesus did not write the Bible, okay? These works were composed by men, living men, and of course living men would have had their own values and ethics and ideas that they had and put that into the work. So a lot of people think that Havamal is the Holy Grail and the Book of Ethics and all the Vikings lived by it, and it's just not. We have plenty of evidence that for some of these stanzas, the Vikings usually acted a bit opposite to these suggestions. Not all, like I said, 90% are just basic general common sense ethics and good suggestions in life, but probably 10% of it, you kind of get the feeling that, like, oh, the person who wrote this is kind of a pompous ass. Okay, so that's the only note to make. Without further ado, let's get started. Covering stanzas 1 to 4 in this video, and I'll read it. There are so many different translations on these. I'm reading Benjamin Thorpe's translation. This one's pretty cool. It's just a little bitty Havamal, but it has all the good translations for the most part. But there's so many different ones, you can read whatever. So I'll put it in English here, and maybe even Old Norse. All doorways before going forward should be looked to, for difficult is it to know where foes may sit within a dwelling. So this one is pretty clear. It just means take a look into a room before you walk in there, because there could be enemies in there, and you should know where they are or they are sitting. So very good advice, because of course we see quite a few examples in the sagas where people get surprised by an enemy like this and get in deep trouble or killed or something bad happens. And so this was very good advice in the Viking Age especially, but also good advice today, even though most of us don't have that many enemies who want to kill us, who are going to be dining in a hall with us. So on to stanza number 2 of Havamal. Givers, hail, a guest is come in, where shall he sit? In much haste is he who on the ways has to try his luck. This one is a bit difficult to understand. There are lots of different translations for this, and you can go look up all the different translations yourself. This is one of the more complicated stanzas in Havamal, but most of the experts relate this to a custom that came that we see records of later on in time that says if you show up at someone's house as a guest but they weren't home, that you were supposed to sit on their firewood until the person came home. And this guest didn't necessarily have to know the person before they came, and we see this is a very common thing in the Old Norse pre-Christian world. If you were a traveler, it was very normal to just show up at someone's house on the road and rest there and get a night's sleep and then leave. And it was the duty of the person who owned the property to be a good host. They would feed you, give you a good place to rest. So they were a very, very hospitable people. And this stanza just suggests that if you stop at someone's house or for some hospitality, for a little bit of rest and food, you don't just let yourself in like an ass and help yourself to a seat. You're supposed to wait on the firewood until the person came back and offered you some hospitality. So both people had to have good manners here, the guest and the host. Next, we will do 3 and 4 together, stanza 3 and 4, because they go together really. This is another one that has to do with guests. Number 3. Fire is needful to him who comes in, and whose knees are frozen. Food and raiment a man requires, who'er the fell has travelled. And number 4, stanza. Water to him is needful, for refection comes. A towel and hospitable invitation. A good reception, if he can get it, discourse and answer. So this is another one having to do with guests, as you can read here. If someone showed up at your house and they had good manners, then it was your duty to give them a seat by the fire, some food and water, and maybe some dry clothes and a towel. And then also a host would give some words, give some words and speak a little bit, and the guest was supposed to listen politely. And then the host would keep his mouth shut and listen to his guest speak while he was being polite. Now, how beautiful is that? That's a really nice thing, a nice stanza here. We think of the Viking society a lot of the times as barbaric and uncivilized, but you could literally show up at someone's house randomly, someone you didn't even know. You could show up there for a night, and they would take you in, and it required trust from both sides, from both people, and that they had good intentions. It just tells you a little bit of something about their society and how things were back then. I mean, today, would you let a random person into your house and give him some help or food or anything at all? No, you wouldn't. But why? Well, it's because we have come so distrustful today as a society. And we are right to be. Of course we have right to be. With good reason. There are so many bad people out there who have just taken advantage of someone's kindness and abused it. So it was not like this in the Viking Age. People trusted each other and were, for the most part, kind to strangers. And as long as that stranger also had good manners too, that there was no reason not to trust them. And also, if you are a guest or a host, don't be a loud dickhead and talk over other people. A lot of people today in 2020 could use that advice, especially here in Los Angeles where I live. So if you want to be a loud dickhead, then do it outside or at some public gathering. And we see this advice is pretty in agreement with the Norse sagas. When you're a guest in someone's house, private, you're supposed to be a good listener. And that's about it. Stanza 1 through 4. I'll finish here, and we'll go on to stanzas 5 and on in the next video. Vi ses nästa gång.